Well, Sree, thank you so much for joining us today. We're super delighted to have you on the podcast. For everyone watching and or listening, Sree heads up all things business at Granola, and we're really excited to spend this time together to hear more about how Sree is using AI in his work, which obviously the answer is yes, given where he works. But before we jump into all of that, Sree, we'd love to just have you introduce yourself. For the few who may not know what Granola is, tell us a little bit more about Granola and what you do there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, first of all, thank you for having me, Anthony and Zach. Really appreciate it. Great to be here. Granola is the AI notepad that helps you get the doing done. We pretty much join your meetings that you want us to, and we help you take awesome notes. And we transform those awesome, like raw notes to something that's AI enhanced to get to the core of what you really want to capture.
Awesome. Sree, tell us a little bit about what your work looked like pre-generative AI. So I'm asking you to think about a few years back
Yeah.
and, maybe what were you doing before Granola and what did your work back then look like pre-AI?
Yeah, definitely. Done a few different roles, but I think a lot of it touched upon um, jumping on a call with someone one to one, whether that's hiring or for like a user call. And I guess like furiously taking notes, during the meeting. If I had to think about before the meeting, I kind of would just like Google someone's name. Like I'd Google Anthony Thomas, like where they worked, and then like probably look at like the first few pages on like Google search, like probably up to like max like 5 pages, right? And I would just like open up a new tab for like everything that looked interesting for me to like know, like what the person's ever said or done, right? Whether that's like I've been interviewing, whether, that's like about to jump in a partner call with someone. Um, that definitely comes to mind. I never touched code, like I never like if there was something related to like even like a marketing page or like a case study where it's really just like text and like a photo, I just would have to ping someone to do that. I remember around 5 years ago when I was doing my own startup, my co-founder would be using Microsoft Word to do designs, like her version of like Figma, and then pass it over to a like our designer at the
Yeah.
startup. So like I don't know, those things like kind of jump uh, right right at me.
Yeah, I mean that's interesting and a little bit incredible, right? I mean, we often start off with all of these really lightweight hacks to get this really important work done, and fast forward just a few years, and we actually have very high quality tools where some of our first work product ends up being near professional quality, and that's what we get to turn over to the true design experts, the development team, and it gets us a lot further along and can help us bridge that gap between what we're trying to convey and what we actually are handing over to our other team members. In that process, what for you made the biggest impact? I mean, whether it's time saved or just the way that your daily work changes. Among those things you just listed, what felt like the biggest step change?
I think it's definitely like the time saved
Yeah.
for me personally, but also for like cross-functional partners. Like I feel like I only really go to engineering if I know like something is like a pretty big back end change that could impact like our biggest enterprise customers. Like that's when I'm just like, okay, hey, I like had a first crack at this. I think this looks messy, so it's also like time saved for them or like other cross functional partners, like even marketing or content, like I can come up with a relatively, decent first draft now just based off stuff that they've done in the past at a pretty good like pace. So time saved, and you could also like the inverse of that is obviously time gained, not just for myself but like for the team to work on some of the more like important things. I think apart from like LLMs, I think one thing that's great is just like the power of laptops, like and how much that's increased too, like what you can do on your laptop. I'm not talking software, I'm talking actual hardware that really like enables a lot of this. Like m- most times I'll have like, you know, at least like two different Google Chrome windows with a bunch of different tabs, and you'll probably see like Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini, and like oftentimes if it's something, if I'm riffing off like a draft strategy doc, I would be like copy pasting whatever ChatGPT gives me out to like Claude, ask it to critique it, get whatever Claude spit me out from the same prompt into ChatGPT, ask it, sorry, to critique it, like, give it some direction. And I'm just like kind of, playing across these different LLMs just to keep refining it even like amongst each other, right? On the same time, I'll also have like two different cursor windows. One is for like our marketing page, and one is like for our app. In case there's any like changes that I kind of want to make. And definitely what I said earlier, if there's something that affects like too many things, that's only when on cursor I would be like, okay, I'm just like, this looks like I could like, cause a security incident. I'm not gonna do this. I'm just gonna ping one of the engineers in the team. So I think like, LMs have obviously really taken off the last few years, but also just grateful for hardware to really progress that enables me to like literally just like, as soon as like a prompt's running and I see that Claude needs time, I'm switching over to Cursor. So I think all of that has just been absolutely wild for someone who's never learned like how to code, who's never learned how to design. Like my bread and butter has always been like, you know, um, writing, right? Like Google Docs or like kind of if you think of like Google Drive and like Slack and email, that's like kind of been my, like the tools that I would normally use.
Yeah, Shree, I have a follow-up question on this point too. With a background in writing, I have to say one of the remarkable things about LLMs in particular has been just how translatable strong writing skills ends up being to highly technical work, which itself is kind of a change. I'd love to hear you say a little bit more about how, having a background in writing and thinking through, communication is actually such a hack for the way that you use these tools in these very technical ways.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think like one's definitely just been through like someone who's always been like a more of a cross-functional role. I had to interact with a lot of cross-functional partners. I used to be like a product manager and then like back in BizOps and then ran my own startup. So I've always like worked with a lot of different functions to get something done. Um, it's just kind of prompt it to like what I want and like guardrails and the background and all of that stuff, but also try to give it like kind of context from what my designer would probably say or like an engineer would probably say. So like through something like the tool I use obviously is like Granola. You can get Granola across like your team meetings or like design reviews to really just ask it like, oh hey, what are the most commons that Rue, our designer, like constantly asks me? You
Yeah.
know, can I get those questions and like bake it in? So like not just like, hey, build me this website, but it's kind of like these are the most common questions that Rue is like constantly probing or asking like across the team. Being able to get those, I think like in a way is like such a hack because I wouldn't like it's not me coming up with them, right? It's just like I have the tools that will let me surface what are common questions that like the experts and leaders in our team from like design or engineering or marketing would be able to say, and being able to bake those in into my prompt, I think helps it like a decent amount.
That's awesome. Shree, I'm curious about how this is impacting your team. And I want to dig into how you're leading.
Yeah.
One of the things you said that I've been thinking about and as you've been sharing has been like how you approach engineering now or how you approach marketing.
Yep.
But there's so much of the old way of doing things of like, hey, here's something I need to get solved. Marketing, please take care of this.
Yeah.
So in as much as you still may see some of those patterns on the team, can you talk to us a little bit about like how are you leading and coaching your colleagues around how they should be utilizing AI or what expectations are you setting?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm pretty blessed here at Granola on like a few levels. One, I think founders have always felt like, whatever AI tools you want to use, you can. Like no questions asked, just get it. Experiment around. Something like Claude if you want to be on like that max plan, or ChatGPT is like whatever $200 a month plan. Like just if it'll help you, use it. No questions asked. For things like that, there's that creative like flexibility and I guess financial freedom to just like relate it to work, and if you think it'll improve you, go for it. So really best to have that. Secondly, our engineering and for sure led by our CTO Vas, like kind of wants everyone to ship stuff. He's like no matter how big, no matter how small, he's just like everyone on the team should be shipping stuff. If someone not in engineering asks to get set up on like GitHub, it is just like a moment to kind of enjoy or like like celebrate. So I think those two things kind of a lot of ways have to be set from the top, and I think we're very we're very encouraging in that way. I think in terms of how I would to the team, I think anyone like remotely interested, and I feel like there's a few people who are like, you got engineering on one side, and you got someone who I guess who hasn't touched code, and then there's this whole spectrum, I guess, and I think I'm probably someone at this point who's coded or shipped like a couple of stuff. We've got Joe, our chief of staff, and like Sam, who's really in our customer experience team, who some of the engineers feel like could be an engineer if he wanted to in a couple of months. So I think it's kind of like up to like people in this in between to like help kind of coach people, especially if it can be kind of intimidating from like the beginning. So um, I think for the sales team, any kind of workflows that feel repetitive, I think they're always encouraged to think about like what they could automate, and like a lot of this is really just like even like the basic stuff like enrichment, with like the Clay, ChatGPT, things that you can do now that they recently announced. That's been mind blowing, I'm happy to share a screen if you want.
That'd be great, please. Yeah, we'd love to see it. Yeah.
So hang on, let me just set this up. Screen. So let's give maybe a concrete example. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, it's coming up in a second.
Cool. So you should be able to see the Granola DeepMind Hackathon. So we're doing this event tomorrow. We've had a lot of people, apply to kind of like attend. DeepMind are being super generous and giving like 50K and like credits to like the winners. You can see here that over like 500 people applied. It's actually closer to 600, and we had to turn away like a good number of people. I remember like up to literally like a year ago, I would review every single person and their like GitHub, their like LinkedIn profile, and all that kind of stuff. What I'm able to do now is really just like ask like ChatGPT, or I think in this case I use Claude, a couple of questions that'll help me. So for one, I can use ChatGPT. Can you see my Claude, or are you still seeing the Google Chrome?
Not yet on my end. Zach, how about you?
Okay.
I think I'm looking at Claude now.
Okay, cool.
Great.
I can show you the browser, and you can see here that I'm hosting this hackathon, right? And I'm prompting this, right? Like I've got the GitHub profiles, and I kind of want to see who's the most active people who applied for a DeepMind hackathon on GitHub, like who's shipping the most PRs through GitHub, and it's like saying a bunch of stuff, a manual check, an API script, and I'm just like, I can use this, but you'd have to guide me, right? And it's just like writing me like this script, right, that you can see up over here. And I honestly don't understand any of this. Like generally, like I don't understand like any of this. But what it kind of does is it gets like these like almost 600 people. I will like copy paste this stuff, and then my output is like, instead of reviewing every single person's GitHub profiles, I'll just get like, these are the people who have shipped the most PRs on GitHub. And it's kind of mind-blowing when you just like think of, I guess, like how much time it used to take me a year ago, just to decide. One of the recruiters came up to me and was just like, hey, we've got this like sourcing map of like great companies in London, and we'd love to know like who are the engineers there, right? Can you do something? And I was just like, sure, give me that CSV. So they gave me the CSV, and they've got like multiple tabs. So I just want to check if like, they can see it. And then I'm just like kind of just prompting it. Probably would want to blur the company over here if that's okay.
Of course.
And then it's just being able to digest like, okay, hey, this is like what's going on in that CSV. And then through the MCP with Clay, it's really able to pull up like all the engineers who like work at, for example, this company, and then I'm just kind of like, I'm like generally blown away. Like you can see me just being like whoa, like in real time, and then I'm kind of just saying more about the dream scenario of what I'd want it to do, right? Like on LinkedIn, send them a message, all that kind of stuff. And then it's saying like what it can or can't do, which is great. which is actually awesome. Don't want it to like, get me into trouble with like LinkedIn. So I'm like, okay, I'm not going to do this. But at the very least, even just like knowing who these people are super easily and being able to like, message them is such like a lift. I showed our recruiter how to do this, and his mind was blown. He was just like, I can't believe that, we can do this. And, this is not even like thinking through all the other automations or workflows you can do with like connecting it to your ATS, connecting it to like Gmail. All those things I think have been like pretty powerful. I'll pause there. I know I showed two different examples, and I know you all have a structure, like a format. So happy to follow that.
No, Sree, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. I just want to like, a couple things that are standing out to me is one, I love how you're responding in awe to Claude and also asking it like, here's my dream scenario. Like that's something I'm taking away. Like I haven't done that yet, to be like, hey, here's my dream scenario. Can you help me with this? Like, why not ask and see what the limits are? That's awesome. And two, I think it's so valuable. Like I love how you coached your colleague through showing them how to do, how you were doing this. And I think there's so much sense of both of those feelings. One, a feeling of awe, wow, this is amazing of what it can do. And then two, what you actually said a bit earlier, which is also a sense of feeling overwhelmed, meaning there's so much coming at us all at the same time. If we just think about the past week and all of the different news in the world of AI, I mean, it can feel incredibly overwhelming, right? So I think as a team leader for myself, and I'm sure for many others, hearing some of what you've been doing, I think is so refreshing to hear. So thank you for sharing that. I want to ask maybe one other follow-on question around, the impact AI is having on your work. Clearly, it's freed up a ton of your time. So I'm curious now, what are you spending more time on now as a result of all of the time freed up for you?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, well, I think when you're working anywhere that's like seeing some number of growth, that's like always stuff that slows and like you kind of have to react to. I think so. There's no shortage of work. I think one, like, to the time being freed up, like it's kind of addictive when you're just like, you feel like you've scratched just like the tip of the iceberg, and you're like, damn, like you can already free up this much time or take away like a certain amount of like admin or repetitive work, right? That I feel like I invested back into learning like more about all this stuff, So like one is just like you get some time back, you kind of put it back into like learning more about the thing that freed that up in the first place. I think secondly, it probably just makes me do more faster. So like I don't know if there was like one partnership or like one website I could have like updated. I can kind of do like 2, 3, 4 like at the same time. I think that's been like massive to be able to like do more with like a similar amount of time. I think it also just frees up more space to think, like, because you can, like, you kind of assigning work and it's being done, and sometimes it takes a few seconds, but in like a good number of cases, especially when it's like something more meaty, like, one thing is, we just launched an MCP, we soft launched our enterprise API. We want to do a lot more in this ecosystem, right? Of like making Granola a place that, companies and developers can like build on top of. Um, who are the best companies that do that? Who make it very friendly to build on top of? And if you launch that kind of a prompt on like Claude or ChatGPT, it can take several minutes, and I will just try to use that to like think about stuff in parallel. It's so I don't know. I feel like I get some uninterrupted time to just like think, just to think.
Oh, man, Sree, that's fantastic. A few things come to mind as I hear you talk about how you use these tools and how your team does. And I'll just mention two of them.
Yeah.
One, you mentioned culture, and I think when it comes to teams incorporating AI, culture ends up mattering so much. When I think about one of our core principles at Level as a previous company I was a part of, a central one was make yourself obsolete. And I think in many companies, the idea of an employee trying to do their work so well, so effectively, so efficiently that they don't have work to do anymore. That sounds terrifying. And in many companies, you could never convince an employee to do that. But it sounds like at a company like Granola, that's almost implicit. I'm hearing that you have folks who are using these tools not just to do their own work more efficiently, but they may be giving themselves enough time to look across the company and say, hey, where can I be useful? Where can I raise my hand? Which is so powerful. And another thing you were talking about, thinking about freeing up time to be able to do more, maybe do differently. And talking about thinking time. One thing that I love about these tools, and you're really describing it, is you in your leadership role are someone who obviously has lots of experience delegating work to other people. But in so many ways, the act of effectively working with an LLM, it's an act of delegation, right? And so these tools also can give our employees an opportunity to actually practice the act of delegations, in some sense, management, and give them too that thinking time while the tool is off doing what it needs to do to think more deeply about their role, instead of constantly thinking about the technical elements of how do I execute on that first thought that I had. So just remarkable that you're really putting a lot of these things in practice. And I think these tools have the chance to make everyone at our companies better thinkers, better teammates, better delegators. It's just really, really remarkable.
I think two things kind of jumped to mind while you were saying that, which I agree with. One around like the delegating. I think apart from using something like Granola, where I'm able to like surface questions that like a designer or an engineer or like our CEO would kind of like constantly ask or like probe, or I know that they care about, right? I'm able to bake that into like, especially on things like Cursor or Claude Code, their plan mode. I think that's been really nice for them to be able to like highlight, to just like, I guess for them, like as in these LM tools to think before they get cracking as well. That kind of in some ways like encourages you as the user, as like the, I guess like the puppeteer, to think as well, right? Or to plan, I guess is like how Cursor calls it. I think the second thing is like, I'm sure, like, I don't know, like, how directly this is related to it, but your point around culture, I think for me, it's also just about connection, like people, certainly around like hiring. I feel like even though I'm as like productive with all these tools, and by the way, like I'm sure, like I said, I'm only scratching the surface. There's people on our team. I'm sure this is like some of your listeners that are doing like way crazier things. It kind of like it frees up at least like some amount of time. Like I can easily say it frees up at least an hour, like without even thinking about it, at least an hour. The honest truth is probably closer to like half a day's worth of work across like everything. To just like meet people, right? Like to meet potential candidates, to meet potential customers or existing customers, right? To jump on Twitter and reply to like users, to give them like this human touch. Like there's a lot of that like you cannot um simply replace, right? Like you have to physically be there, that the one-to-one human interaction. And it is nice to be able to have more time to do like what I think of as like higher leverage activities, right? Whether that's like thinking through stuff more or meeting people. And I think that's like one side benefit of like all of this, yeah.
Sree, I love how you put that because I don't think we hear it often enough. The more we use AI, the more time we get to do powerful human things, like more time to think and reflect, more time to spend with one another, more time to build those relationships with our colleagues, our partners, etc. I mean, that's so powerful. And in our age, yet something still that we're all struggling with, right? Like still behind monitors and devices. So amazing that you put it that way. Before we close things out, Sree, I want to ask you um, about providing advice to someone who may still be on that early stage or getting started and may be feeling overwhelmed around where do I go? What do I do? I mean, 100%, I would say you don't have to say this. They should definitely be using Granola. But in addition to that, like what would you tell them about where they can start?
Yeah. say like start with like whatever you're doing. Like think about all of the things, if you think of your week or your day, that you have to do on a consistent basis, and kind of type or articulate it. If you're like a typer, that's pretty clear. But I use something called Whisper Flow, that just like on my phone or my laptop, where like if I just feel like I could be meandering, I would just rather like meander and like talk and chat into like my phone or my laptop with Whisper Flow, and it'll like capture that, right? And I just kind of have this like ongoing list of things that I would love to like build one day. Like it's just this thing, like I'll just like think about, oh hey, like maybe for um like these football tickets that always get sold out, I would love to get like an alert as soon as like a ticket frees up, or even like a warning like on my, it's something that shoots me like a text, to something like, this common kind of idea of the like a personal CRM, but just like building one for like how I work, how I think, how I kind of like meet people and like want to remember like the most important things, like a personal finance tracker. I don't know, like none of these things are like particularly innovative, right? But like I guess people are particular with how they want them set up. So just like start with something that you yourself need or want, try to articulate that, and then I would just like feed that into like Claude or ChatGPT. And I'm pretty direct with it. Like, apart from saying, wow, that you saw, I'm just like, say this in plain English. Like, I don't know how to code. Like, oftentimes when I'm like frustrated, I'll just be like, treat me like I'm dumb and break this step by step, and like, just, like straight up do that. Like, if whatever the output of like Claude or ChatGPT is something you don't understand, like, that's okay. Like you can ask it to take it like a step um further and like make it easier to like break up. I'm trying to see if I can maybe share my screen one last time. Um, we set up like certain partnerships with like VC firms, certain people like the just like startup like ecosystem, and basically I set up this automation, which I never thought that I could do. And all I did was just like screenshot Zapier step by step. Hang on, if I just share screen, actually, this time. Um, so this is our startups page. It's, and you get 1 year free if you're like part of like a certain like venture fund. I built this website myself using Cursor. But more importantly, there's this like application form, right? And the whole bit of it is like, if you click certain things here, employee size, and like you mentioned, certain investors, and you click apply, you'll have a Stripe code automatically sent to you and like applied to your Granola account. Like we'll do a bunch of checks and it'll send. And if you don't like automatically hit all those filters, like you'll get an email saying that we're reviewing your application. It'll then like send something to my Slack to be like, review this manually. And none of this sounds like rocket science. It like really isn't. But again, for someone who is like, for all sense and purposes, like illiterate, right, in this like world, in this language, I'm really just able to like screenshot all that I need to do and then put this into like Claude or ChatGPT, right? And then really be able to like, for example, come up with like the code I need to put into Zapier to run like JavaScript, like it, I don't know, like is, for someone with my skill set, just like remarkable to think, and like, I think all you really need to do is just spend like a little bit of time to get started, to learn some of this stuff. And maybe actually the very last thing I'll probably leave you all with is like, this is my GitHub profile. You can see over here, like, I shipped something like last January 29th, which I think was our pricing page changes with the help of like some engineers. Then a few months later, I think shipped our enterprise page on Granola. And then over the holidays, hang on. Give me one sec. But yeah, over the holidays, you can kind of see I spent some time, kind of came back into the new year, and these green boxes, I guess, like represent every like PR that you've shipped on like GitHub, and you can just, I don't know, like you can just do things now in a way that you just couldn't really do before just using all of these things, and like people notice it's kind of cool. You feel faster, at what you're doing. Like all you need, I guess, is just like to block out a little bit of time to get started on like something. And like you can now talk to these things through like voice, apart from typing. You can use screenshots. Like there's so many things to like just get going. So all you need is a little bit of time and like not be afraid to like ask like whatever these tools to like keep breaking it down for you until you understand.
That's amazing. I love it. Head of business at Granola shipping on GitHub. I mean, that is so inspiring. Sree, I got to get busy, man, here. So thank you. That's awesome. Hey, we love to close things out. We like to call it the A to Z moment on our podcast. We're going to just ask you some quick, like rapid fire questions here, and then we'll close things out. And then Zach, I think we'll ask you like one final question as well. So I'll kick it off with over the next 6 to 12 months, Sree, what excites you most about what's happening with AI?
I think there's like it's pretty prevalent theme on Twitter on just like I guess Claude code for non-coders, right? And I think Claude coming out with cowork, I think it's just like the beginning, and I'm starting to really like lean into that. I'm really excited for this, like really empowering like the non-developers to do a lot more. So that's one. I think the second thing that probably comes to mind, probably like voice. I kind of found myself at the end of last year using Whisperflow to really chat through and like discuss almost to myself, like some of the more important things that I had to think about and like plan, and I'm just like really interested to see where voice goes this year, almost as an interface to talking to LLMs and getting things done.
Awesome. And then what's one AI habit you now can't imagine working without?
Oh, I feel like just shipping the small changes, like being able to do that myself, like pushing that to GitHub, Cursor, Claude Code. I can't not go back from that. I feel like I used to bug the engineers about some of the smallest changes, and now I just feel like I can run with that, and I would hate to go back to them with that.
One last question, my friend. So if someone listening to this podcast were to try just one of the things that you mentioned today, just one, what's the low lift thing that they should pick up and run with?
One thing, I think just like using the LLMs, like to critique and improve output. You could talk to ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini with the same kind of prompts, but keep feeding it each other's like outputs, and ask it to review it like critically and guide it, nudge it, keep refining it. For me, that's been such an awesome hack. And all you need to know is like how to type and like use those tools, which I think are some of the most famous ones out there.
That's fantastic.
Awesome. Thank you, Sree. This has been amazing. Really appreciate your time and all the insights you've shared.
Yeah, thank you both for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
It's a pleasure, Sree.